My name is Alfredo, 32 years old, and I never thought I'd be taking my own family to court. Growing up, I was always in my sister Sophia's shadow, watching my parents shower her with everything while I struggled alone. But when she hit me with that wrench in my parents' garage, something in me finally snapped. The legal battle that followed exposed decades of favoritism and changed everything. If you've ever had to fight for justice against your own family, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, this story of standing up for myself was worth the scars. Growing up in Portland, Oregon with my parents, Maria and Thomas Jackson, was an exercise in invisibility. From my earliest memories, our middle-class home in the suburbs operated on a clear hierarchy, and I was decidedly at the bottom. Dad worked as a bank manager at First National, always dressed in crisp suits and polished shoes. Mom built a successful career as a real estate agent, known for selling luxury properties throughout the Portland area. On paper, we were the picture-perfect American family with 2 children and financial stability. The reality inside our home told a different story. The favoritism toward my sister Sophia started when she was born, just 3 years after me. I have vague memories of being the center of attention as a toddler, but everything changed once Sophia arrived. She was the little princess with curly blonde hair and big blue eyes that matched my mother's, while I inherited my father's darker features and quiet demeanor. When I turned 8, I asked for a bicycle for my birthday. Nothing fancy, just a basic model I'd seen at the local store. My parents got me a used one from a garage sale, which broke within 2 weeks. When Sophia turned 8, she received not only a brand new purple bicycle with streamers and a basket, but also a matching helmet, knee pads, and a special birthday party at the local recreation center with 30 classmates. Sophia is more social, my mother explained when I questioned the difference. She needs these things for her development. This pattern repeated throughout our childhood. My birthdays were modest family dinners with a store-bought cake. Sophia's birthdays featured themes, hired entertainment, custom cakes, and extravagant gifts. By the time I was 12, I'd stopped expecting anything special for my birthdays and learned not to ask. The disparity extended beyond celebrations. In 5th grade, I won the science fair with a project about automotive engineering, showing early signs of my passion for mechanics. Neither of my parents attended the award ceremony despite my repeated reminders. 2 weeks later, they both took a day off work to watch Sophia perform in the school choir concert where she had no solo parts. "Your project was during work hours, Alfredo," my father said dismissively when I pointed out the unfairness. "We can't just leave our jobs for school events." That summer, I discovered my love for mechanics when Uncle Frank, my father's brother, let me help restore his vintage Mustang. The feeling of taking something broken and making it work again gave me purpose. When I excitedly told my parents about what I'd learned, my mother wrinkled her nose. "That's dirty work, Alfredo. You should focus on your studies instead of getting grease under your nails," she said, while my father nodded in agreement. Yet when Sophia showed interest in fashion design and spent hours cutting up old clothes to create new styles, my parents converted our basement into a studio for her, complete with a sewing machine, mannequin, and supplies that must have cost thousands of dollars. By 13, I'd become almost entirely self-sufficient out of necessity. I packed my own lunches, washed my own clothes, and learned to cook basic meals. Meanwhile, my mother still laid out Sophia's clothes each morning and made her special lunches with notes tucked inside. My father would help Sophia with her homework every evening, while I was told to figure it out when I asked for assistance with algebra. When I was 16, after watching my sister receive a new laptop for doing well in school despite her C-average grades, I finally gathered the courage to confront my parents about the favoritism. "I don't understand what I did wrong," I said during dinner one night. "Why does Sophia get everything handed to her while I have to work for every little thing?" The silence that followed was suffocating. Then my mother reached across the table and patted my hand with a condescending smile. "You've always been so independent, Alfredo. We're just giving you both what you need. Sophia needs more support, and you need to learn self-reliance. We love you both equally." My father didn't even look up from his plate. "Don't be dramatic, son. This victim mentality won't get you anywhere in life." Their response was my first experience with gaslighting, though I wouldn't learn that term until years later. They made me question my own reality, wonder if perhaps I was being overly sensitive or misinterpreting their actions. But the evidence was too consistent to deny. Uncle Frank became my sanctuary during those difficult years. A bachelor with no children of his own, he recognized my passion for mechanics and encouraged it. Every Saturday, I'd bike to his place and work alongside him in his garage. He taught me about engines, transmissions, and the satisfaction of solving mechanical problems. "You've got a gift, Alfredo," he'd say, his hands covered in the same grease my mother detested. "Don't let anyone tell you different." In his garage, covered in motor oil and learning the intricacies of automotive repair, I found more validation than I'd ever received at home. The hours spent with Uncle Frank weren't just about learning a skill. They were about finding someone who saw value in me exactly as I was. Meanwhile, at home, the dynamic continued. Sophia would make demands, and my parents would rush to fulfill them. I would achieve something significant, and it would barely register on their radar. I learned to stop sharing my accomplishments with them, to avoid the pain of their indifference. By the time I reached my senior year of high school, I had accepted that I would need to create my own path without parental support. The realization was both liberating and profoundly sad. No child should have to accept that their parents' love is conditional. Yet that was the truth I carried as I prepared to enter adulthood. I graduated high school with honors, earning a 3.8 GPA despite working part-time at a local gas station on weekends. The graduation ceremony was on a sunny June morning, and I searched the crowd for my parents' faces as I walked across the stage. They were there, but their attention was fixed on their phones, probably taking photos of Sophia, who was participating in the ceremony as a sophomore usher. When the principal announced my name and academic honors, there was a brief moment of applause, but no cheering or whistles like some other parents did for their kids. After the ceremony, my mother hugged me quickly and said, "Good job, Alfredo," before turning to gush over Sophia's ushering duties and how beautiful she looked in her special sash. The contrast became even more pronounced when Sophia graduated 2 years later. My parents threw her a massive party, invited extended family from across the country, and presented her with a diamond necklace as a graduation gift. My graduation gift had been a $50 gift card to a department store. College brought new challenges. I'd been accepted to Portland Community College's Automotive Technology program, which aligned perfectly with my skills and career goals. When I showed my parents the acceptance letter, my father glanced at it and said, "Community college? Well, I guess that makes sense for you." The real blow came when I asked for help with tuition. My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances across the kitchen table. "We're really stretched thin right now, Alfredo," my father explained. "With the economy and our mortgage, we just don't have extra funds for college expenses." I nodded, already having expected this response. "I understand. I'll figure it out." Just 2 weeks later, Sophia came bursting through the door waving an acceptance letter from the prestigious Pacific Northwest Fashion Institute. My parents erupted in celebration, popping a bottle of champagne and calling relatives to share the news. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart," my mother exclaimed, hugging Sophia tightly. "Don't worry about a thing. We'll handle all the costs. You just focus on becoming a great designer." I sat silently at the dining table, completing a financial aid application, as my parents promised Sophia they would cover her full tuition, apartment rent near campus, and living expenses. The tuition at her private art school was 4 times what my community college program cost. When I moved out to a tiny studio apartment near campus, my parents didn't help with the move. I borrowed Uncle Frank's truck and moved my few belongings myself. Meanwhile, when Sophia moved into her luxury student apartment downtown, my parents hired movers, bought her new furniture, and stocked her refrigerator with groceries. Despite these challenges, college became a turning point for me. For the first time, I found myself surrounded by people who shared my passion for automotive engineering and who valued hard work and technical skill. I made friends who noticed the disparity in how my family treated me and offered the support my parents never did. "That's not normal, man," said my classmate Jordan, after witnessing a phone call where my parents declined to help me pay for required textbooks. Parents are supposed to help if they can, and it sounds like they definitely can. Working 20 hours a week at Jerry's auto shop while carrying a full course load was exhausting, but it gave me valuable hands-on experience and just enough income to survive. Jerry Peterson, the shop owner, recognized my work ethic and talent, giving me increasingly complex repairs and eventually a small raise. "You've got the best diagnostic instincts I've seen in 20 years, Jerry told me after I correctly identified a tricky electrical issue in a Ford F-150 that had stumped his senior mechanics. "Keep this up, and you'll go far in this business." His words meant more to me than any praise I'd ever received from my parents. At Jerry's shop, my abilities were recognized and rewarded. My value was based on my skills and character, not on some mysterious and unattainable standard I could never meet. As my confidence grew professionally, the emotional distance between me and my family widened. I would call home once a week out of obligation, conversations that became increasingly superficial. My parents rarely asked about my classes or work, but would spend most of the call talking about Sophia's latest fashion project or social event. During my second year of college, I discovered through a casual comment from my mother that they had increased Sophia's monthly allowance to cover her networking expenses at fashion industry events. The amount they gave her each month was more than I earned working part-time while studying full-time. That Thanksgiving, I returned home for dinner, bringing a small bottle of wine I could barely afford as a contribution. Sophia arrived 2 hours late, disrupting the meal, but my parents just smiled indulgently and kept her plate warm. When conversation turned to school, Sophia complained about a professor who gave her a B- on a design project. "That's just unfair," my mother sympathized. "Your designs are always so creative." My father nodded. "We can talk to the dean if you want. That grade could affect your opportunities." When Sophia asked about my studies, I mentioned making the dean's list for the second semester in a row. "That's nice," my father said, without looking up from his plate. "Pass the gravy, would you?" The conversation immediately shifted back to Sophia's upcoming fashion show. I sat silently, feeling like a ghost at my own family table. After dinner, I helped clean up while Sophia relaxed in the living room, showing my parents photos from parties she'd attended with her fashion school friends. That night, as I drove back to my apartment, I realized that no achievement of mine would ever be enough to earn the unconditional love and support my sister received simply for existing. The understanding was liberating in its finality. I could stop trying to win their approval and instead focus on building a life that made me proud, regardless of their recognition. The remaining years of my associate degree program passed in a similar pattern. I excelled academically and professionally, developing a reputation at Jerry's as a mechanic who could solve problems others couldn't. My social circle expanded to include supportive friends who valued me for who I was, and my relationship with my family became increasingly distant, perfunctory, and painful. After 2.5 years of balancing full-time studies with work, I graduated with my associate's degree in automotive technology, finishing at the top of my class. The graduation ceremony was on a rainy Saturday in December. Uncle Frank sat in the audience, cheering loudly when my name was called. My parents had sent a text that morning saying they couldn't make it because they needed to help Sophia prepare for an end-of-semester fashion showcase happening the following week. I wasn't surprised, but the emptiness in my chest expanded a little more. Uncle Frank took me to dinner afterward at a steakhouse I could never have afforded on my own. "I'm proud of you, kid," he said, raising his glass in a toast. "You did this on your own, against the odds. That makes it even more impressive." 2 weeks after graduation, I received a job offer from European Motors, a high-end repair shop specializing in luxury imports. The position came with a substantial pay increase, benefits, and opportunities for advancement through manufacturer certification programs. It was everything I had worked for. When I called my parents to share the news, my mother answered and immediately put me on speakerphone. "That's good, Alfredo," she said after I explained the job offer. "Oh, before I forget, we have exciting news too. Sophia's been selected as a finalist in the regional young designer competition." My accomplishment was acknowledged with a single sentence before being completely overshadowed. Yet again, I ended the call quickly, promising to visit soon, knowing I probably wouldn't. With my new salary, I was able to move out of my cramped studio into a modest one-bedroom apartment closer to work. It wasn't luxurious, but it was clean, safe, and mine paid for with money I had earned through my own efforts. I bought simple furniture, set up a small home office in the corner of the living room, and for the first time, began to feel a sense of stability. 6 months later, Sophia graduated from fashion school with average grades, but an impressive portfolio of designs. Despite not having visited my new apartment or shown any interest in my career progress, my parents insisted I attend her graduation celebration. Family should be together for important milestones, my mother said firmly over the phone, as if this rule had applied equally to my own graduation. The celebration was held at an upscale restaurant downtown, with about 30 guests, including extended family and Sophia's friends. I sat at the far end of the table, nursing a beer and making small talk with distant relatives who knew nothing about my life. After the main course, my father stood up and tapped his glass for attention. His face was flushed with pride as he looked at Sophia. "We have a special surprise for our amazing graduate," he announced, handing Sophia an envelope. Sophia opened it and screamed in delight, jumping up and down. "A BMW? Are you serious? Oh my God!" My parents beamed as Sophia ran outside, followed by the entire party. There in the parking lot sat a brand new white BMW 3 Series with a massive red bow on the hood. The car must have cost at least $40,000. "You deserve it, sweetheart," my mother said, wiping away tears. "We're so proud of everything you've accomplished." I stood at the back of the crowd, feeling like I was watching a scene from someone else's life. For my graduation, there had been no party, no car, not even a card, just an empty seat in the audience where my parents should have been. As everyone admired Sophia's new car, my Uncle Frank made his way to my side. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "Yeah," I replied, though we both knew it was a lie. "Just wondering what it's like to have parents who are proud of you." Later that night, as the party was winding down, I found myself alone with my parents at the table, while Sophia showed off her new car to her friends in the parking lot. "I need to ask you something," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Why did Sophia get a BMW for graduation when I didn't even get a card for mine?" My mother looked uncomfortable. "Alfredo, that's not fair. The situations are different." "How?" I pressed. "I graduated with honors. I worked my way through school. I never asked for anything close to a luxury car." My father sighed as if I was being unreasonable. "Sophia needs a reliable vehicle to get to job interviews and networking events. Her career depends on making the right impression in the fashion world." "And my career doesn't matter?" I asked. "I drive to work every day in a 15-year-old Honda with 200,000 miles on it." "You're a mechanic, Alfredo," my mother said dismissively. "You can fix your own car if it breaks down. Besides, you've always been more practical than your sister." "You mean I've had to be practical because I've never had any other choice?" I replied. My father's expression hardened. "I think you're being ungrateful. We've given both of you what you needed to succeed. Sophia needs different things than you do." In that moment, hearing my father call me ungrateful for questioning why my sister received a luxury car while I received nothing, something broke inside me. Not in a destructive way, but in a clarifying one. It was as if the last thread of hope that my parents might someday treat me fairly finally snapped, and with it went the burden of seeking their approval. "You're right," I said quietly, standing up from the table. "Sophia does need different things than I do. She needs constant validation and material gifts. I just needed parents who showed up." I left the restaurant before they could respond, driving home in my old Honda that had never felt more like a badge of honor. That car represented every hour I'd worked, every obstacle I'd overcome, every time I'd picked myself up when no one else would. After that night, I made a conscious decision to limit my contact with my family to major holidays and unavoidable events. I focused instead on building my career at European Motors, advancing quickly from general service technician to specialized diagnostic expert. Within 2 years, I was handling the shop's most challenging repairs on high-end vehicles like Porsches and Maseratis. Despite my professional success, the years of parental favoritism and neglect had left deep emotional scars. I developed anxiety in social situations, constantly questioning if I was good enough or if people secretly found me lacking, just as my parents seemed to. I struggled with trusting others, always waiting for them to discover I wasn't worth their time, just as my family had decided. After a particularly severe anxiety attack following a phone call with my mother, who had spent 20 minutes detailing Sophia's latest achievements without asking a single question about my life, I finally sought professional help. Dr. Rachel Bennett, a therapist specializing in family trauma, helped me understand the toxic dynamic I'd grown up with. What you're describing is classic narcissistic family dynamics, with you cast in the role of the scapegoat and your sister as the golden child, she explained during our third session. It's not about anything you did or didn't do. This pattern was established long ago and says everything about your parents' issues and nothing about your worth. Those therapy sessions were painful but illuminating. For the first time, I had a framework to understand my childhood experiences. The favoritism wasn't because Sophia was better or because I was lacking. It was because my parents had created a dysfunctional system that required one child to be idealized and another to be diminished. Understanding the dynamic didn't erase the hurt, but it helped me begin to separate my sense of self-worth from my parents' inability to love me as I deserved. It was a slow, uneven process of healing, punctuated by moments of progress and painful setbacks. But with each passing month, I felt more anchored in my own value, less desperate for the approval I would likely never receive. 3 years after Sophia's graduation, I reluctantly agreed to attend a family barbecue at my parents' house. Uncle Frank had convinced me to go, arguing that maintaining some connection with family was important, even if that connection was strained. "You don't have to stay long," he advised. "Just make an appearance, be civil, and leave if it gets uncomfortable." It was a warm July afternoon when I arrived at the familiar 2-story suburban house where I'd grown up. The driveway was crowded with cars, including Sophia's white BMW, now 3 years old but still gleaming. I parked my Honda on the street and took a deep breath before heading inside. The backyard was filled with extended family and my parents' friends. My mother greeted me with a quick hug before returning to her conversation with my aunt. My father nodded in my direction while flipping burgers on the grill. Neither asked about my life or work. I grabbed a beer from the cooler and found Uncle Frank near the patio. For the first hour, things were uneventful. I made small talk with relatives, avoided my parents when possible, and kept my interactions with Sophia to brief, polite exchanges. She had recently started a small clothing line that was being carried in a few boutiques around Portland, a venture funded entirely by our parents. "Business is tough," she complained while scrolling through her phone. "But Daddy says he'll cover the rent on my design studio for another year until I really get established." I nodded, swallowing the reminder that I'd never received a dime of financial support for my career. "That's fortunate. Commercial space is expensive." As the afternoon progressed, my father approached me with a request. "Alfredo, the check engine light came on in my car yesterday. Since you're here, would you mind taking a look?" It was the closest thing to recognition of my professional skills I'd ever received from him. Despite our strained relationship, I agreed. "Sure, I can check it out. Keys in the usual place?" He nodded, and I headed to the garage, almost glad for the excuse to escape the social gathering. My father's Audi was parked inside, and I popped the hood to begin a basic inspection. I was checking the connections on the engine sensors when the side door opened, and Sophia walked in. "There you are," she said, her voice already holding an edge of irritation. "I've been looking all over for you." I glanced up briefly. "Just helping Dad with his car." "What's up?" "My car's making this weird noise when I accelerate. I need you to fix it." The entitlement in her tone was nothing new, but something about being in our childhood garage, once again being expected to drop everything to address Sophia's needs, triggered a deep weariness in me. "I can take a quick look before I leave, but if it needs actual work, you should bring it into a shop," I replied, continuing my inspection of our father's engine. Sophia's expression hardened. "Why can't you just fix it? That's what you do, right? Fix cars?" "Yes, at my job, where I get paid for my expertise," I explained patiently. "Just like you get paid for your clothing designs." "Are you seriously going to charge your own sister?" she asked incredulously. "After everything Mom and Dad have done for us?" The irony of her statement was so profound I actually laughed, which only angered her further. "What's so funny?" she demanded. "Sophia, they bought you a BMW and funded your entire business. Meanwhile, I put myself through school while working full-time and never received a dime of support. So yes, I value my time and skills enough to not work for free, even for family." Her face flushed with anger. "That's such bullshit. You've always been jealous of me. Mom and Dad helped you plenty, but you were too proud to accept it." "When?" I challenged, straightening up from the engine. "Name one time they offered meaningful help that they didn't give you tenfold." Sophia crossed her arms, unable to provide an example but unwilling to concede. "You know what? Forget it. I'll take it to the dealer. I don't need your help." "That's probably best," I agreed, turning back to our father's car. "The dealer can—" I never finished that sentence. From the corner of my eye, I saw Sophia grab something from my father's workbench. Before I could fully register what was happening, I felt an explosive pain in my left shoulder as something heavy connected with my body. The force knocked me against the car, and I heard a sickening crack. White-hot pain shot down my arm and across my chest. I looked up in shock to see Sophia standing there, a large metal wrench in her hand, her eyes wide with what seemed like surprise at her own actions. "What the hell?" I gasped, my right hand instinctively moving to my injured shoulder, which was already swelling rapidly. The garage door opened, and both my parents rushed in, likely having heard the commotion. "What's going on in here?" my father demanded. "He was being horrible to me," Sophia cried, immediately falling into victim mode. "I just asked for his help, and he was cruel and condescending." I stared at her in disbelief, still clutching my throbbing shoulder. "She hit me with a wrench because I wouldn't fix her car for free." My mother immediately moved to Sophia's side, putting an arm around her shoulders. "I'm sure Alfredo provoked you, honey. He's always been difficult." The pain in my shoulder was nothing compared to the pain of hearing my mother instantly take Sophia's side, even when I was the one physically injured. I looked to my father, hoping for some recognition of the severity of what had just occurred, but his expression was one of annoyed inconvenience rather than concern. "Let's all calm down," he said dismissively. "Alfredo, you're fine. It couldn't have been that hard. Sophia, give me the wrench." "I'm not fine," I said through gritted teeth, the pain intensifying with each heartbeat. She hit me full force with a wrench. I think my collarbone might be broken. My mother rolled her eyes. "Don't be so dramatic. Sophia wouldn't hurt anyone that badly." "Look at my shoulder," I insisted, carefully removing my hand to reveal the rapidly forming bruise and obvious deformity where the bone had been impacted. Instead of concern, my father's expression showed irritation. "If you'd just helped your sister like I asked you to help me, none of this would have happened." In that moment, the full weight of 3 decades of neglect, gaslighting, and unfairness crashed down on me. My own sister had physically assaulted me, and my parents were blaming me for it. They were standing in front of their injured son and comforting his attacker. "I'm going to the hospital," I said quietly, cradling my arm against my body to minimize the pain as I moved toward the door. "Don't bother coming. I wouldn't want to inconvenience anyone with my medical emergency." "Alfredo, you're overreacting," my mother called after me. "Come back inside and we'll put some ice on it." I didn't respond. I walked carefully to my car, each step sending jolts of pain through my shoulder. Starting the car and shifting into drive with one hand was challenging, but the adrenaline pumping through my system helped me manage the 15-minute drive to Portland General Hospital. In the emergency room, the triage nurse took one look at my shoulder and immediately moved me to an examination room. X-rays confirmed what I already suspected. My clavicle was fractured, with a clean break where the wrench had made impact. "This is a significant injury," Dr. Wilson said, examining the X-ray images. "How did you say this happened?" I hesitated only briefly before telling the truth. My sister hit me with a mechanic's wrench during an argument. The doctor's expression became concerned in a different way. "That's assault. Have you reported this to the police?" "No," I admitted. "It's complicated. Family dynamics." "I understand family is complex," he replied. "But this is a serious injury caused by another person with a weapon. We're required to document this properly." and I strongly recommend involving law enforcement. As the doctor fitted me with a special sling designed to immobilize my shoulder and collarbone, a hospital social worker named Karen joined us. She gently explained my options regarding reporting the assault and provided resources for victims of family violence. Many people don't realize that family violence isn't just between intimate partners, she explained. Sibling abuse is real and often goes unreported because of family pressure and complicated emotions. I left the hospital 3 hours later with a properly immobilized shoulder, prescription pain medication, and a stack of informational pamphlets about assault, victims' rights, and the legal process for pressing charges. I also had Karen's card with her direct number and her assurance that I could call any time if I decided to report the incident. Driving home was even more difficult than the drive to the hospital, as the pain medication hadn't fully kicked in. When I finally reached my apartment, I found my friend Lucas waiting outside my door, looking worried. "Dude, where have you been?" "I've been calling for hours," he said, then noticed my sling. What the hell happened? I invited him in and told him everything: the family barbecue, Sophia's demand, the wrench attack, and my parents' reaction. Lucas listened in growing disbelief and anger. "You need to press charges," he said firmly when I'd finished. "That's assault with a deadly weapon. She could have killed you if she'd hit you in the head." "They're my family," I said weakly, the painkillers finally taking effect and making my thoughts fuzzy. "Family doesn't do this," Lucas countered, gesturing to my immobilized shoulder. "And family definitely doesn't blame you for being attacked. If some random person at a bar did this to you, would you just let it go?" His question lingered in my mind as I drifted into an uneasy sleep that night. The pain in my shoulder a constant reminder of the violence I'd experienced at the hands of my own sister, and the absolute failure of my parents to protect me, even when I was right in front of them, visibly injured. Morning brought painful clarity, both physical and emotional. As I struggled to dress myself one-handed, my phone buzzed with text messages from my parents. I expected concern, perhaps even apologies. Instead, I found accusations. From Mom. "Sophia is very upset about yesterday. You always push her buttons. Please apologize so we can move past this." From Dad. "Your sister feels terrible. Don't make this bigger than it needs to be. Family problems should stay in the family." There was no acknowledgement of my injury, no questions about my well-being, no recognition that their daughter had committed a serious crime against their son. Just more gaslighting, more protection for Sophia, more expectations that I would absorb the hurt and carry on as if nothing had happened. Something shifted inside me as I read those messages. A lifetime of being the family scapegoat, of accepting less than I deserved, of making excuses for their behavior. It all crystallized into a moment of absolute clarity. This cycle would never end unless I ended it. With my decision made, I called Lucas, who arrived 30 minutes later, ready to drive me to the police station. On the way, I called Karen, the hospital social worker, who arranged to meet us there and help navigate the process. "I want to file a report about an assault," I told the officer at the front desk, my voice steadier than I expected. Detective Thompson, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, took my statement in a private interview room. Lucas waited outside while Karen sat with me for support. "I need you to understand something," Detective Thompson said after hearing my full account. "Filing this report means we will investigate and likely press criminal charges against your sister. This isn't something you can later withdraw if your family pressures you. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about my fractured collarbone, about 3 decades of being treated as less than, about my parents standing in that garage blaming me for my own assault. "Yes," I said firmly. "I understand, and I want to proceed." The detective nodded. "We'll need your medical records, photographs of the injury, and any text messages or communications relevant to the incident. Given the severity of your injury and the use of a tool as a weapon, this will likely be charged as assault with a deadly weapon, which is a felony." The reality of what I was doing, potentially sending my own sister to jail, hit me fully. But then I remembered how easily she had grabbed that wrench, how little hesitation she'd shown before striking me, and how quickly my parents had rushed to protect her, even with the evidence of her violence right in front of them. By that evening, the police had contacted Sophia and my parents. My phone exploded with messages and missed calls, which I ignored on Karen's advice. The next morning, I retained attorney Sarah Martinez, who specialized in assault cases and had experience with family violence situations. "Your case is strong," she assured me after reviewing the medical documentation and police report, "but you should be prepared for significant backlash from your family. They've established a pattern of protecting your sister at your expense, and that won't change just because the legal system is involved." She was right. The cease and desist letter she sent, instructing my family not to contact me directly, but to route all communication through her office, only escalated their fury. They began reaching out to extended family members, telling a distorted version of events that painted me as vindictive and unstable. Aunt Melissa, my mother's sister, called despite the cease and desist. "How could you do this to your own sister?" she demanded. "Over a little argument? Your parents are devastated." She broke my collarbone with a wrench. I replied calmly before ending the call and blocking her number. Uncle Frank was one of the few family members who stood by me. "I've watched how they've treated you your whole life," he said during a visit to help me with household tasks I couldn't manage one-handed. "This was a long time coming. You have every right to hold Sophia accountable." 3 weeks after filing the police report, I received notice that the district attorney had formally charged Sophia with assault with a deadly weapon. Simultaneously, on Sarah's advice, I filed a civil lawsuit seeking damages for medical expenses, lost wages during my recovery, pain and suffering, and punitive damages. The first court appearance was a procedural hearing where Sophia would enter her plea. I arrived with Sarah to find my sister dressed in a conservative suit, looking uncharacteristically subdued. Beside her stood an expensive criminal defense attorney. I later learned was charging $500 per hour, paid for by my parents, of course. More shocking than Sophia's attorney was seeing my parents sitting directly behind her in the gallery, a united front in support of the daughter who had assaulted their son. They didn't even look in my direction as I entered, as if I were a stranger rather than their firstborn child. "Not guilty," Sophia stated when asked for her plea, though the evidence against her was overwhelming. Outside the courthouse, reporters from local news outlets had gathered, alerted to the case by its unusual nature. Sarah had prepared me for this possibility. "Family violence cases sometimes attract media attention," she'd warned, "especially when they involve people from otherwise respectable backgrounds." My parents pushed past the reporters without comment, hustling Sophia into a waiting car. I followed Sarah's advice to make a brief, factual statement. "I'm pursuing justice through the proper legal channels after being assaulted by my sister, resulting in a fractured collarbone. I have no further comment at this time." That evening, the story appeared on local news and in the Portland Tribune. The headlines were sensational. "Fashion designer charged with assaulting mechanic brother with wrench and family feud turns violent. Woman faces felony charges for attacking brother." The publicity seemed to enrage my family further. Distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years called to express their disapproval. Cousins sent judgmental messages. My father's brother, not Uncle Frank, but my Uncle David, left a voicemail saying, "No real man would send his sister to jail. Your grandfather would be ashamed." Their reactions only reinforced my decision. These people had enabled and encouraged the toxic dynamic that led to my assault. Their outrage was not about justice or my well-being. It was about maintaining the family system where Sophia could do no wrong and I could do no right. As the weeks passed and the legal proceedings continued, my support system solidified. Lucas and other close friends stepped up to help with daily tasks while my shoulder healed. Co-workers at European Motors adjusted schedules to accommodate my recovery. Uncle Frank checked in daily, offering both practical assistance and emotional support. Meanwhile, the discovery phase of the civil lawsuit revealed just how deeply the financial favoritism ran. Sarah subpoenaed my parents' financial records, which showed that since our 18th birthdays, they had given Sophia over $200,000 in gifts, paid tuition, housing assistance, and business investment. During the same period, their financial contribution to my life totaled less than $5,000, mostly in small birthday and Christmas gifts. The psychological toll of pursuing legal action against my own family was immense. Some nights, I lay awake, questioning whether I was overreacting or being vindictive. Dr. Bennett helped me work through these doubts during our therapy sessions. "You're not punishing Sophia," she reminded me. "You're holding her accountable for her actions and refusing to participate in a family dynamic that has caused you significant harm. That's not vengeance. It's healthy boundary setting." 6 months after the assault, with my collarbone mostly healed but still causing occasional pain, both the criminal and civil cases were approaching trial. Sophia's attorney had made several attempts to get the charges reduced or dismissed, all unsuccessful given the clear evidence and severity of the injury. My parents made one last attempt at pressuring me to drop the cases, showing up at my apartment unannounced one evening. "This has gone far enough," my father said when I opened the door, his tone authoritative, as if speaking to a misbehaving child rather than a grown man with a legitimate grievance. "You're destroying this family with your stubbornness." "Sophia made a mistake," my mother added, her expression pleading. "But she's your sister. Do you really want her to have a criminal record for one bad moment?" I looked at them standing in my doorway, these people who had consistently prioritized Sophia's well-being over mine, who had witnessed her assault me and immediately blamed me for it, who were now concerned about her future, but had never shown such concern for mine. "This isn't about one bad moment," I said quietly. "This is about a lifetime of moments where you both made it clear that Sophia's feelings, needs, and even her violence matter more than my basic right to safety and fair treatment. I'm not destroying the family. I'm finally refusing to let the family destroy me." I closed the door on their protests, and with it, closed a chapter of my life where I accepted less than I deserved in desperate hopes of earning their love. The trial dates were set, and I was ready to see this through to its conclusion, whatever the outcome. The week before the trial, Sarah and I met daily to prepare. We reviewed evidence, practiced my testimony, and discussed potential cross-examination questions from Sophia's attorney. The medical evidence was clear X-rays showing the fractured clavicle, photographs documenting the severe bruising, and my orthopedic surgeon's testimony about the force required to cause such an injury. "The physical evidence is the strongest part of our case," Sarah explained. "But your testimony about the pattern of favoritism and family dynamics will provide crucial context for both the criminal charges and our civil claims." Despite my attorney's confidence, I was anxious. Standing up against my family in such a public forum felt simultaneously terrifying and liberating. The night before the trial, I barely slept, rehearsing my testimony and imagining various scenarios. The criminal trial began on a Monday morning in downtown Portland. The courtroom was more crowded than I expected, with local media present due to the unusual nature of the case. Sophia sat at the defense table looking appropriately somber in a conservative blue dress. Her attorney, a stern-faced man in his 50s named James Blackwell, known for defending wealthy clients. My parents sat directly behind Sophia, my mother occasionally reaching forward to touch her shoulder supportively. They didn't acknowledge me as I entered and took my seat behind the prosecutor's table. Uncle Frank sat beside me, his presence a silent counterbalance to my parents' support of Sophia. The prosecutor, Andrea Coleman, presented a straightforward case. She called the emergency room doctor who had treated me, who testified about the severity of the fracture and confirmed it was consistent with being struck by a heavy metal object. The police detective described my initial report and the photographs of my injury taken at the hospital. A medical expert explained that the location and nature of the break indicated significant force had been applied directly to the collarbone. When it was my turn to testify, I felt a strange calm settle over me as I was sworn in. After answering the prosecutor's initial questions about my background and relationship with my sister, I described the events in the garage clearly and without embellishment. Miss Jackson grabbed a large wrench from the workbench and struck me in the left shoulder with significant force, I stated. I heard a cracking sound and experienced immediate, severe pain. "Did you do anything to physically threaten your sister before she struck you?" Andrea asked. "No. We were having a verbal disagreement about car repairs, but I was standing at least 6 feet away from her, partially leaning into the engine compartment of my father's car when she hit me." Blackwell's cross-examination attempted to paint me as resentful and jealous of Sophia's success. "Isn't it true that you've always been envious of your sister's close relationship with your parents?" he asked. I've been hurt by the disparity in how we were treated, I corrected. But this case is about being physically attacked with a weapon, not about childhood resentments. His questioning grew more aggressive, suggesting I had provoked Sophia with insulting remarks about her business failures or that I had moved toward her threateningly. I remained calm, consistently returning to the facts. I was assaulted while performing a favor for my father by a sister who was angry I wouldn't work for free, resulting in a serious injury that required months of recovery. After my testimony, Andrea called Uncle Frank, who provided a powerful account of the favoritism he had witnessed throughout our childhood and early adulthood. I watched my brother and sister-in-law consistently prioritize Sophia's needs and wants over Alfredo's most basic requirements, he testified. When Alfredo told me about the assault, I wasn't surprised. The family dynamic had always excused Sophia's behavior while holding Alfredo to an impossible standard. Lucas testified about finding me after the hospital visit, describing my physical state and emotional distress. He couldn't even put on a shirt by himself, Lucas told the court, and he was in shock that his own parents had blamed him for being attacked. The defense case relied heavily on character witnesses praising Sophia's gentle nature and community contributions. Former teachers, fashion industry colleagues, and family friends described her as sweet-tempered, generous, and incapable of deliberate violence. Sophia herself took the stand, tearfully describing a lifetime of pressure to succeed and claiming she had just snapped after years of feeling judged by her older brother. She admitted grabbing the wrench, but insisted she had only meant to scare me, not actually cause injury. Under cross-examination, Andrea Coleman skillfully led Sophia into damaging admissions. "So you deliberately picked up a heavy metal tool during an argument?" Andrea clarified. "Yes, but I didn't mean to." "And you deliberately swung it at your brother's upper body?" "It wasn't planned. You just what, Miss Jackson? Accidentally picked up a wrench and accidentally swung it with enough force to break a bone?" Sophia's composure cracked. "He always thinks he's better than me, always judging me for getting help from our parents when he's too proud to accept anything. I just wanted him to stop looking down on me." Her outburst revealed the truth. The attack hadn't been a momentary loss of control, but the culmination of a lifetime of entitlement and rage when challenged. My parents' testimony was equally revealing. They minimized the severity of my injury, suggested I had provoked Sophia through years of difficult behavior, and admitted under questioning that they had never witnessed me being physically aggressive toward my sister or anyone else. When Andrea asked my mother if she had sought medical attention for me after witnessing the assault, she appeared genuinely confused by the question. "Alfredo is an adult," she replied. "He could go to the doctor if he needed to. So you saw your son injured, potentially seriously, and your first concern was for the emotional state of the person who injured him," Andrea clarified. My mother's hesitation spoke volumes. Sophia was upset. During closing arguments, Andrea emphasized the clear evidence of assault with a deadly weapon, the severity of the injury, and the disturbing family dynamic that had enabled Sophia's sense of entitlement and lack of accountability. Blackwell focused on Sophia's clean record, community contributions, and characterized the incident as an unfortunate family dispute that has been blown out of proportion by an embittered brother seeking revenge. After 3 days of testimony, the jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning their verdict. Guilty on the charge of assault with a deadly weapon. Sophia gasped audibly, while my mother began to sob. My father sat stone-faced, his arm around my mother. The judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later, and Sophia was released on continued bail. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked for my reaction to the verdict. "This case was never about revenge," I stated calmly. "It was about accountability and establishing that no one, not even family, has the right to physically harm another person." The civil case was scheduled to begin the following week, but Sophia's guilty verdict dramatically strengthened our position. 2 days after the criminal conviction, Sarah called with news. "They want to settle," she said. "The criminal conviction makes our civil case almost a certainty, and they're trying to avoid more negative publicity." The initial settlement offer was insultingly low. Over the next several days, through Sarah's skilled negotiation, the amount increased substantially. The final settlement included full coverage of all my medical expenses, compensation for lost wages, and a significant sum for pain and suffering. Additionally, my parents would be required to pay punitive damages, which Sarah argued were warranted given their role in enabling the assault by consistently shielding Sophia from consequences. The total settlement came to just over $300,000. It was more money than I had ever possessed at one time, and represented not just compensation for my physical injury but acknowledgement of the decades of emotional harm I had endured. Sophia's sentencing hearing was somber. Given her lack of prior criminal record, the judge sentenced her to 3 years of probation, mandatory anger management and therapy, 200 hours of community service, and restitution for any medical expenses not covered by the civil settlement. More significant than the legal penalties was Judge Harriman's statement to Sophia during sentencing. "Miss Jackson, this court has seen overwhelming evidence not just of your assault on your brother, but of a family dynamic that fostered your sense of entitlement and immunity from consequences," the judge stated firmly. "While your lack of criminal history has spared you incarceration, make no mistake, what you did was not a momentary lapse, but the culmination of a lifetime of being taught that your needs and feelings supersede others' basic rights. I sincerely hope this experience serves as a wake-up call, not just for you but for your entire family." My parents sat in shocked silence as the judge publicly called out the toxic family system they had created. For the first time in my life, an authority figure had seen the truth of our family dynamic and named it plainly. The Portland Tribune ran a feature article about the case, interviewing family therapists about toxic favoritism and its consequences. The article included statistics about sibling abuse and its underreporting, particularly when parents enable or excuse the behavior. My willingness to pursue legal action was described as breaking the silence around a common but often hidden form of family dysfunction. As news of the verdict and settlement spread through our extended family and social circles, reactions were mixed. Some relatives who had initially condemned my decision to press charges contacted me privately to share their own experiences of favoritism and family dysfunction. Others maintained that I had destroyed the family by involving the legal system in what should have remained a private matter. I found I no longer cared about these judgments. For the first time in my life, my experience had been validated, my pain acknowledged, and the responsibility placed where it belonged, not on me for failing to accept mistreatment, but on those who had inflicted it. The media attention gradually faded. Sophia began her probation and community service. My parents retreated from public view, their carefully cultivated image of the perfect family permanently tarnished. And I began the process of rebuilding my life, not as the family scapegoat whose feelings didn't matter, but as a man who had stood up for himself and won. The settlement money sat untouched in my account for 2 months, while I considered what to do with it. This wasn't just financial compensation, it represented a turning point, and I wanted my decisions about it to reflect the new direction of my life. After careful consideration and many discussions with Dr. Bennett, I made my decision. I would use the majority of the funds to start my own automotive repair business, specializing in high-end European vehicles. The garage I had in mind was for sale on the east side of Portland, a solid building with good equipment and a loyal customer base, as the owner was retiring. Second Chance Mechanics. I named it, partly for the reclaimed vehicles we would specialize in, but mostly for the second chance I was giving myself to build a life based on my own values, rather than chasing approval I would never receive. The purchase and renovation of the garage gave me purpose during the final stages of my physical recovery. Though my collarbone had healed, I still attended physical therapy sessions twice weekly to regain full range of motion and strength in my left shoulder. Physical healing proved simpler than emotional recovery. Despite the validation of the court verdict and settlement, I still struggled with deep-seated feelings of unworthiness and anxiety in relationships. Dr. Bennett became an essential guide through this territory. Legal accountability was necessary, but it doesn't automatically heal the emotional wounds, she explained during one session. That requires recognizing the faulty beliefs you internalized and consciously replacing them with healthier ones. We worked on identifying these beliefs: that I wasn't worthy of love unless I earned it through achievement, that my needs were less important than others, that expressing hurt or anger was selfish. Gradually, with practice and conscious effort, I began challenging these thoughts when they arose. 3 months after the court cases concluded, I received a certified letter from Sophia. My first instinct was to throw it away unopened, but Dr. Bennett encouraged me to read it when I felt ready. Regardless of what it says, remember that you get to decide what relationship, if any, you want with your sister going forward, she advised. The letter contained a formal apology, clearly written as part of her therapy or probation requirements. It acknowledged the assault and expressed regret, but stopped short of addressing the lifetime of dynamics that had led to that moment. I filed it away without responding. A week later, I filed for, and was granted a restraining order against Sophia, not out of fear or vindictiveness, but as a boundary that allowed me to focus on healing without unwanted contact. The court readily approved it, given the recent assault conviction. My parents made several attempts to contact me in the months following the trial. First came angry voicemails blaming me for Sophia's legal troubles and demanding I fix this mess. When those went unanswered, they shifted to guilt-inducing messages about family obligation and forgiveness. Finally, they tried offering financial help with my new business, help I neither needed nor wanted, given that the settlement had provided ample startup capital. I maintained no contact, focusing instead on building my new life. The garage renovation was completed by early spring, and I opened for business with 3 employees: myself, a service manager named Tony who had worked with me at European Motors, and a promising young apprentice named Miguel, fresh out of technical school. From the beginning, I established Second Chance Mechanics on principles opposite to the family dynamic I'd grown up with: transparency, fairness, and recognition based on merit, rather than favoritism. Our pricing was clear and consistent. Promotions and responsibilities were assigned based on demonstrated skill and effort. Every contribution was acknowledged and valued. Uncle Frank became a silent partner in the business, investing some of his retirement savings in exchange for a small ownership stake. More importantly, he continued to be the supportive father figure I'd always needed, stopping by the shop several times a week to offer advice, encouragement, or simply companionship. "I'm proud of you, Alfredo," he told me on opening day, surveying the freshly painted workspace with its state-of-the-art equipment. "You've built something important here, and not just a business." 6 months after opening, Second Chance Mechanics was turning a modest profit, with a growing reputation for honest work and technical excellence. We specialized in restoring and maintaining vintage European sports cars, a niche market with customers who appreciated quality and were willing to pay for it. My social life expanded as well. After years of isolation and focusing primarily on work, I joined a local classic car club and began attending monthly meetups. There I met fellow enthusiasts who shared my passion without the baggage of family history. At one such meetup, I met Amanda, a corporate attorney who had inherited her father's 1972 Porsche 911 and needed help maintaining it. Our professional relationship quickly evolved into friendship and eventually romance. Unlike previous relationships where I'd held back parts of myself, with Amanda I shared the full truth of my family history early on. "That explains why you flinch when I raise my hand too quickly," she observed after hearing about the assault. "Thank you for trusting me with this." Amanda's understanding and patience, as I worked through my trust issues, strengthened our connection. She never pressured me to reconcile with my family or minimize the impact of their treatment. Instead, she supported my boundaries and celebrated my progress in therapy. 1 year after the court case, I established a program at Second Chance Mechanics, offering free basic automotive maintenance workshops to disadvantaged youth. The program, called Under the Hood, taught practical skills while providing mentorship to teenagers from low-income neighborhoods. "I know what it's like to feel unsupported and undervalued," I explained to the first group of participants. "In this garage, your effort and willingness to learn are what matter. Everything else is just noise." Watching these young people gain confidence through mastering practical skills reminded me of my own journey with Uncle Frank years earlier. Many of the teens returned as volunteers after completing the program, creating a community bound by shared knowledge and mutual respect. The business continued to thrive, expanding to 7 employees and a waiting list of customers by the end of the second year. We were featured in Portland Monthly magazine as one of the city's best specialty automotive shops, with particular praise for our transparent pricing and commitment to quality. Despite these successes, there were still difficult moments. Holidays brought waves of grief for the family relationships I had lost, or more accurately, had never truly had. Birthday celebrations with friends highlighted the absence of parents who had never properly celebrated me. Seeing fathers with their sons in the shop sometimes triggered a deep sadness for what my relationship with my own father should have been. 18 months after the trial, I received a handwritten letter from my mother. Unlike previous communications, this one contained no demands or accusations. Instead, it expressed something I'd never heard from her before: regret. "I've been seeing a therapist," she wrote. "She's helping me understand how our family dynamics harmed you. I'm not asking for forgiveness or a relationship. I just want you to know that I recognize now what we did wrong, and I'm sorry for my part in it." The letter sat on my desk for weeks. I felt no obligation to respond, no rush to forgiveness, no pressure to rebuild a relationship that had never been healthy. Dr. Bennett helped me process my complex feelings about this apparent change in my mother. "People can grow and change," she acknowledged, "but that doesn't obligate you to re-enter a relationship that caused you harm. You get to decide what, if any, contact serves your well-being now." I chose not to respond immediately, focusing instead on the life I was building: a business based on integrity, friendships founded on mutual respect, and a romantic relationship with healthy communication and boundaries. If reconciliation with any family members was to occur, it would happen on my terms, when and if I was ready. The journey from family scapegoat to self-reliant business owner had been painful but ultimately transformative. The legal victory had been important not because of the financial settlement, but because it represented the first time my experience had been publicly validated, my pain acknowledged as real, and the responsibility placed where it belonged. More valuable than any court verdict was the inner freedom I had gained. Freedom from seeking approval that would never come, from accepting blame that wasn't mine to carry, from participating in a family system that required my diminishment to function. Looking back on the path that had led me here, from the neglected child desperate for parental love, to the determined student working his way through college alone, to the injured brother, finally standing up for himself in court, I recognized that each stage had strengthened me in different ways. The hardships hadn't broken me. They had forged my resilience, my work ethic, my capacity for empathy toward others who felt unseen. The wrench that broke my collarbone had also, ironically, broken the chains of a toxic family dynamic I might otherwise have remained trapped in forever. The injury that had caused such physical pain had ultimately freed me from a lifetime of emotional pain. As I closed the garage one evening, watching the sunset reflect off the polished hoods of the vintage cars in our showroom, I felt a quiet peace settle over me. My worth had never been determined by my parents' capacity to recognize it. My value had never depended on Sophia's willingness to respect it. Those were truths I had always carried within me, waiting to be claimed. Have you ever had to make the difficult decision to distance yourself from toxic family members for your own well-being? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength through adversity. Share this with someone who might need to be reminded that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes the most important second chances are the ones we give ourselves.